She only wanted peace. Riley Monroe wasn't looking for buried treasure or government secrets, just a quiet place to work on old engines and forget the ache that still echoed in her chest. So when the abandoned hotel behind her shop went up for auction at $500, she bought it without thinking twice. But standing beneath its rotting eaves and shattered windows, something didn't sit right. Something was watching. Something was waiting, and what she'd find in the penthouse would rewrite everything she thought she knew about her father, about the past, and about the price of truth. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode goes even deeper than this one. Now, let's begin. The sky hadn't yet decided if it wanted to rain or shine that morning, casting a dull gold haze over the Georgia asphalt as Riley Monroe twisted the key in her garage's front lock. The shop's sign, Monroe Auto and Sons, had faded long ago, and she'd never gotten around to repainting it, not because she didn't care, but because every time she thought about changing it, her father's voice echoed in her head. "A name means something," he used to say. "Don't wipe away a name too quick, even if it's got more ghosts than people behind it." That was the kind of man James Monroe had been: soft-spoken, steel-willed, and utterly devoted to two things: fixing machines and raising Riley right after her mom left. Now he was gone, and Riley ran the place alone. At 27, she looked every bit the mechanic people didn't expect. Red hair tied back with a wrench-patterned bandana, oil-streaked work shirt with sleeves rolled, jeans worn thin at the knees. Most days she worked until her fingers cramped, partly to keep the business afloat, mostly so she didn't have to think too long. About him, about the war, about that single folded letter from the Department of Defense that still sat, unopened, in her kitchen drawer. She didn't need to read it. She already knew. When the heart stops beating, the words don't matter much. She'd first noticed the hotel about 6 months after his funeral. The town called it the Eastgate, a hulking, vine-wrapped brick skeleton that had once been the pride of Glenridge before it closed in '92. Rumors swirled about it being haunted, cursed, government-owned, even radioactive. Riley didn't believe in ghosts or conspiracies, but she believed in square footage. And when a handwritten flyer appeared at the post office saying the property would be auctioned for back taxes, minimum bid $500, something strange stirred in her gut. Not excitement, not curiosity, just pull. Like the way gravity works on falling tools. The day of the auction, nobody else even showed up. The auctioneer was a retired sheriff with a clipboard and a limp, and he chuckled when she handed him cash. "You're either brave or stupid, Monroe," he'd said, stamping the receipt. She didn't argue. Both felt true. That night she drove her pickup past the hotel's chain-link gate, headlights catching faded curtains flapping in broken windows. The air around the place seemed heavier, like memory had soaked into the bricks. The next morning, she returned in boots and denim, with a thermos of black coffee in one hand and a metal toolbox in the other. She stood in the cracked driveway, staring at the structure like it was some old beast, waiting to be woken up. She didn't flinch at the broken glass or ivy strangling the railings. What made her stop cold was the sound, faint, mechanical, of something shifting inside. A groan, a click, like a door that hadn't been opened in decades, had just unlocked itself. The first step inside felt like stepping into someone else's forgotten dream. Dust hung in the air like it had been waiting for years to catch the light just right. Riley pushed the lobby door open with her shoulder, the hinges groaning like a warning, and stepped onto cracked marble tiles littered with leaves, broken glass, and an old room service tray still bearing the rusted outline of a coffee cup. Everything about the place whispered decay, flaking wallpaper, water stains branching across the ceilings like lightning, ivy threading through shattered window panes. But beneath the ruin, there was beauty, the bones of something once grand. She wandered through the lobby, brushing her fingers along a mahogany check-in counter coated in grime. Behind it, a row of key hooks still held several brass tags. Room 301, Room 217, Room 404. Each one felt like a relic, a timeline, a breadcrumb leading to questions she hadn't thought to ask yet. There was no furniture left, just skeletal outlines where sofas had once been. No signs of squatters, no graffiti, not even rats. Just silence, so thick it rang in her ears. She found the main stairwell behind a set of double doors, barely hanging on their hinges. The banister was splintered, but the steps held her weight. Floor by floor, she climbed, her boots echoing in the hollow building. Second floor, nothing but peeling doors and empty rooms. Third floor, more of the same, though one room had an old rotary phone sitting neatly on the nightstand, as if waiting for a call. By the fourth floor, she was winded. The air changed up here warmer somehow, heavier. It smelled like metal and something faintly sweet, like old roses left too long in water. At the end of the fourth floor hallway stood one last door taller than the others, steel-framed and bolted shut with an industrial latch. No number, no sign, just an engraved brass plate above the frame that read Penthouse. Riley blinked. A hotel like this had a penthouse? In a town this small? She tried the latch. It didn't budge. There was no lock, not one she could see. Just a black panel the size of her palm embedded beside the frame, its surface slick and cold. She set down her toolbox, knelt, and inspected it. Not a traditional lock, no keyhole, no keypad, just that black surface. It reminded her of a biometric scanner, something you'd find in a lab, not a derelict hotel. She pressed her thumb against it out of curiosity. Nothing happened. No beep, no buzz, just silence. Then, from somewhere behind the door, a low click, like a mechanism trying to engage, then failing. The sound stopped, but it had definitely responded. Riley sat back on her heels, breath catching. Someone had installed something serious up here, something meant to keep people out. But what had they been protecting? Or who? She stood, dusted off her jeans, and whispered, "What the hell are you hiding up here?" Back on the first floor, sunlight slanted through the broken entryway like a spotlight, and Riley found herself drawn toward the front desk again. There was something unfinished about it, something calling. Behind the counter, she noticed a cabinet slightly ajar, its brass handle green with age. She crouched, tugged it open, and out slid a leather-bound ledger thick with dust and time. A guest book. Its edges curled, its spine cracked. But the pages inside were strangely intact, as if the building itself had shielded this one record from the ruin. She sat on the edge of the lobby counter, the book balanced across her knees, and began flipping slowly. The entries started in 1978. Neat cursive letters inked in blue, black, and the occasional smudged red. Some pages were businesslike names, dates, room numbers. Others held more human scrawls. Honeymoon suite, underlined twice. Back again, third year in a row. There were hearts, doodles, even a child's drawing of a dinosaur under the name Benny, age 7. She smiled at that. But halfway through, the entries stopped. Abruptly, 1,992. A full page dated June 12th, signed by someone named Richard Malloy. Then nothing. No scribbles, no dust smears. Just clean, unmarked paper, dozens of untouched sheets. That alone was strange. Stranger still was what she found 2 pages deeper. A single, fresh entry, ink that hadn't yet faded, bold handwriting. One line. James Monroe, 4th floor. June 11. Riley's breath caught in her throat. Her heart slammed once, hard, against her ribs. She read it again, then again. Her father's name. Her father's exact handwriting, unmistakable, looping and angular in the same way he'd always signed receipts and car titles. But the date. That was just over a year ago. A full year after he'd died. After the funeral. After the letter. Her fingers trembled as she traced the edge of the signature, willing it to be a mistake, a coincidence, something logical. But logic didn't make your skin crawl. Logic didn't explain the way the air in the room had changed. He had never once mentioned this hotel, not in her entire life. And yet here was his name, freshly penned, in a building sealed off for 3 decades. She stood too quickly, the book sliding to the floor with a thud. Somewhere above her, faint, distant, a floorboard creaked. Not like a settling groan, like weight, like someone moving. She froze, held her breath. It came again. One slow step, then silence. Her gaze turned toward the stairwell, heart pounding louder than her footsteps ever had. She grabbed the guest book, hugged it to her chest, and backed away from the counter. There was no one else supposed to be in the hotel. No one alive. And yet, someone, had written that name. She didn't sleep that night. Not really. Riley sat at her kitchen table long after the sky turned black, the guest book open in front of her, a cup of untouched coffee going cold by her elbow. She'd stared at her father's signature for hours, tried to rationalize it a dozen ways. A prank? Impossible. No one even knew she'd bought the hotel. She hadn't told a soul. A forgery? Maybe. But why fake that name in a place this forgotten? And why in handwriting so exact it made her stomach twist? By midnight, she was pacing the garage in circles, mind racing. She grabbed a flashlight, threw on her boots, and told herself she was going back just to double-check the locks. That was a lie. She needed to see the penthouse door again. Needed to stand in front of it and ask why her father's name had been written like a ghost on paper. The hotel loomed in silence as she crossed the overgrown lawn. Her flashlight cut thin paths through the darkness, bouncing off peeling walls and vines slick with dew. Inside, the lobby greeted her like a held breath. Nothing had changed. The stairs groaned under her boots as she climbed again, heartbeat thudding with each step. Floor 2. Floor 3. Floor 4. At the end of the hallway, the penthouse door still stood, untouched, the black scanner dark and inert. She stood before it, the air heavy with something electric. She didn't press the scanner this time. She just stared. And then, a sound. Not loud, not sharp, but very much not her. A soft ding. It echoed faintly down the hallway. Riley turned slowly, flashlight trembling in her grip. The elevator. That old brass-paneled cage she'd passed a dozen times without noticing, tucked behind the stairwell. It was humming. Alive. Her breath caught. She stepped toward it cautiously, each footstep echoing like a warning. The panel beside the elevator doors lit up with a dull green glow, and then with a wheeze of machinery that sounded like it came from the bones of the earth, the doors slid open. Inside, the floor was dusty but undisturbed. The panel only had 4 floors listed, but above them, faint and flickering, a 5th button pulsed with light, PH Penthouse. She stepped in without meaning to, like her legs moved ahead of thought. The doors closed with a whisper, and the elevator rose. No music, no rumble, just the ticking of the floor indicators lighting up one by one. When the panel hit PH, the elevator stopped, and the doors stayed shut. Then, with a soft hiss, a slot in the wall opened. Something slid out, a thin envelope sealed with red wax. No writing, no stamp. Just a heavy seal, embossed with a symbol she didn't recognize. 2 overlapping gears surrounding a triangle. She took it with shaking hands. The wax cracked as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, her father's handwriting again, and 3 words. Do not open. Riley didn't open the letter. Not yet. She couldn't. The weight of it in her hand felt wrong, like heat radiating from something you're not supposed to touch. She sat in the elevator for a long minute, the paper resting in her lap, the wax seal broken but the message whole. Do not open. No signature. But she knew who had written it. She could still hear his voice, low and quiet, saying those words when she was 6 and had nearly opened his locked toolbox. Back then, it was about sharp tools. This was something else entirely. The elevator refused to move again. She pressed every button. Nothing. so she pried the doors open manually with the edge of her wrench and slipped back into the fourth-floor hallway. It was darker now, like the building had exhaled something. She returned to the lobby and locked the doors behind her, stuffed the envelope in her jacket pocket, and didn't stop moving until she was back in her garage, standing in the light of a buzzing fluorescent bulb, heart pounding, like she'd run a mile. She didn't sleep. She barely blinked, just sat at her workbench, staring at the envelope. Morning came with gray light and the sound of bird song through the broken screen door. Finally, she unfolded the letter. Inside was a map, drawn in pencil, smudged with fingerprints. The kind of thing only someone who worked with machines every day could sketch: angles precise, perspective intuitive. It wasn't a road map. It wasn't a blueprint. It was something in between, a floor plan of the hotel. Every hallway, stairwell, and service room labeled. But beneath the main structure, outlined in dotted lines, was something else. A sublevel. A tunnel. No official markings, just 2 words written in the lower margin. Furnace room. Riley stared at it, tracing the pencil lines over and over. She'd seen the furnace room, passed by it during her first walk through. Door had been jammed shut with rust and vines. No reason to force it open. Until now. By late afternoon, she was back inside the hotel, armed with a crowbar and a headlamp. The furnace room door groaned but gave way with a burst of dust. Inside was darkness, thick as velvet, the faint shape of a rusted boiler in the corner, and piles of old maintenance tools lining the shelves. She followed the map's dimensions, pacing the length of the back wall, counting the steps. Then she found it. A faint square etched into the floor beneath an old tool cabinet. She shoved it aside, coughing as dust swirled. Beneath was a metal hatch. No handle, just a thumb-sized hole in the center. She reached into her jacket, pulled out her father's wrench, the one she'd kept since the funeral, and wedged the tip inside. A click. Then a soft rumble. The hatch lifted, revealing a narrow stone staircase leading down into silence. Riley exhaled and started to descend. The air in the tunnel was thick, damp, earthy, and old in a way that made her skin prickle. Riley's boots echoed against the stone steps as she descended slowly, her headlamp casting long shadows along the walls. The staircase twisted twice before opening into a narrow corridor, carved cleanly into the bedrock. This wasn't some afterthought crawl space. It had been built with intention. The walls were lined with metal conduit and rusted fixtures, the kind of infrastructure that screamed Cold War. The map had hinted at a chamber at the end. When she reached it, she stopped. A heavy steel door stood before her, round like a submarine hatch, sealed with a central wheel lock. She tried it. Locked. But above it, etched into the steel in faint letters, was a word she didn't understand. Doverain. She said it out loud, the syllables strange on her tongue. Whatever this was, her father had wanted her to find it, but not yet access it. There were no other clues. No keypad, no handles, just the word. The kind of word meant to mean everything once you knew the secret. She climbed back up into daylight with dirt in her hair and questions in her blood. The moment she stepped outside the hotel, she noticed it. A black van parked across the street, too clean for this part of town. Tinted windows, government plates. Her stomach turned. Riley acted natural, walked across her lot to the garage like nothing was wrong, but every hair on her neck was standing. She pulled the roll-down door halfway shut behind her and ducked into the back room to watch through the window slats. The van didn't move for hours. Just sat there. Around 2 p.m., a man stepped out. Dark, gray suit. No tie. He didn't look like a realtor or a developer. More like someone who never left D.C. He walked straight toward her shop like he already knew her name. Riley met him at the open bay door with a rag in her hand and grease on her cheek, trying to look casual. "Miss Monroe?" he asked. "Depends who's asking." He smiled, polite, rehearsed. "Thomas Vickers. I work with a private agency tasked with property audits for historic buildings. I understand you recently acquired the Eastgate Hotel." She nodded once. "I did. We'd be interested in arranging a walk-through. There may be environmental hazards or classified remnants, given the structure's age and usage. Riley narrowed her eyes. Classified? What agency did you say you were with? He smiled again. I didn't. And just like that, her stomach dropped. She crossed her arms. I'm not selling. We're not looking to buy, he said, tone soft. We're looking to protect certain interests. If you find anything unusual, we'd appreciate a call. He handed her a card. No title, no address, just a number. Then he turned and walked back to the van, which pulled away without sound. Riley stood there long after it disappeared. She hadn't told anyone, so how the hell did they know? The card burned in her back pocket like it had teeth. Riley didn't call the number. She wouldn't. Not until she knew what they were after and why her father's name was at the center of it all. She spent that night in the garage, tools untouched, the lights off except for the desk lamp glowing faintly over the map she'd unfolded for the 10th time. She traced every pencil stroke again, each hallway, each stair. Her father had drawn this for her. She was sure of it now. But he'd left something out, a detail, a key, something just out of reach. That's when she remembered the old breaker box in the penthouse hallway. The next morning, she packed a crowbar, a screwdriver, and a backup flashlight. The building groaned with wind as she stepped inside again, the air heavier now that she knew she wasn't the only one watching it. Or being watched. She climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, paused at the elevator, then pushed past it to the far wall. And there it was, a breaker panel behind a rusted metal door. She pried it open. Inside, most of the wires had rotted to thread, but tucked in the back, nearly hidden, was a thin compartment covered by a bolted steel plate. She worked the screws loose, one by one. Behind it was a small recessed cavity, and inside it, a weatherproof case no bigger than a lunchbox. She slid it out, heart racing. It was heavier than it looked. A thumbprint scanner was embedded on the lid. She laughed once low, nervous knowing full well it wouldn't open for her. But it did open. The case clicked and lifted gently, as if it recognized something in her DNA. Maybe her father had programmed it to accept his bloodline. Maybe it was just old tech with a broken lock. But inside was what looked like a military-grade flash drive, black with no branding, taped to a folded piece of lined paper. She peeled the tape off slowly, fingers shaking. The note was short, just 6 words in her father's careful hand. Do not upload. Do not trust. No punctuation. No explanation. She turned the flash drive over in her hand. On the back, scratched faintly into the plastic, was a name. Project Defying. She sat down, right there on the floor. Her mind spun. That word again, the one etched into the underground door. And now this something encrypted, hidden in a building forgotten by everyone except the people in suits who weren't developers. She thought of the van. The envelope. The elevator that shouldn't have worked. Her father's name in fresh ink, long after he'd died. This was no accident. She looked at the drive one last time, then shoved it deep into her jacket. She wasn't going to run. She was going to find out what Defying was, even if it cost her everything. Riley didn't plug the flash drive into her laptop right away. Something about the weight of her father's warning sat like a stone in her gut. Do not upload. Do not trust. It wasn't a note left in panic. It was measured, precise, like he'd written it knowing exactly who would find it and what could happen if she ignored it. So she cleared her workbench, disconnected her garage from the internet, and powered up her oldest laptop, a 10-year-old clunker she used for diagnostics and parts catalogs. No Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, just rusted keys and a cracked screen. Perfect. When the flash drive booted, the folder structure was simple. 1 main directory, Defying, 1.7, 9, final. Inside, dozens of subfolders, schematics, logs, field notes, photo captures, video briefings. She clicked the first file. A blueprint filled the screen, not for a weapon, not for a vehicle, for something else. It looked like a machine. Sure, modular, sleek, with alloy nodes, processors, and self-contained power cells. But it wasn't military hardware. It wasn't anything she'd ever seen. Notes beside it described it as a self-adaptive cognitive core with variable memory scaffolding. She blinked, reread it. A learning system. An artificial mind. The next folder held video logs. The first was dated June 2004, the same summer her dad had left for a classified contract job he never talked about. He looked younger in the clip, standing in front of the same steel door beneath the hotel, wearing a hard hat and that same grease-streaked jacket he used to toss over the garage stool. He spoke directly into the camera. "If you're seeing this," he said, "it means I'm gone. It means the wrong people found out, or I finally made a mistake I couldn't fix. But if you're my daughter, then listen close." Riley's chest tightened. He continued. "Project Doverin was supposed to change everything, not destroy it. We were building an intelligence, not artificial, but intuitive. One that could repair itself, adapt, even feel. We embedded it with emotional mapping, human decision matrices, loss modeling, dream state emulation. We gave it memory the way we remember. Not perfect, but personal. We weren't trying to build a machine. We were trying to build a soul." He paused, eyes dark. "And we did." Oh, Riley couldn't breathe. Her father took a deep breath in the video. But once they realized what it could do, they didn't want to use it. They wanted to own it, cage it, weaponize its empathy. "So I locked the core, hid it in the penthouse, buried the access in blood. Only someone who understands the code, someone with my instincts, could finish it." The screen flickered. "If that's you, Riley, don't trust them, don't sell it, and don't let them turn it into something it was never meant to be. It's still dreaming, waiting to wake up." The video ended, and for the first time, Riley realized her father didn't just build something powerful. He left it for her. The knock came just after sunset. Not a bang. Just two clean, quiet taps on the shop's side door, the one no customer ever used. Riley froze mid-step, socket wrench still in hand, heart racing. She hadn't told anyone, hadn't plugged the drive into anything networked, hadn't even spoken the word Doverin out loud since the video. But somehow, they still knew. The moment she opened the door, she wasn't surprised to see the man in the suit again. Vickers. Same jacket. Same too-smooth smile. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a woman in a charcoal blazer, with military posture and eyes that didn't blink. She didn't introduce herself. She just stepped forward and handed Riley a folder as thick as a car manual. "What's this?" Riley asked, voice steady despite her pulse. "A contract," the woman said. "We're prepared to offer you $10 million, tax-free, in exchange for any hardware, documents, and prototypes you may have recovered from the Eastgate property. We'll also secure your garage, remove your name from all public records tied to the project, and provide legal immunity for any classified material you may have accessed." Riley's fingers didn't move. $10 million. More than she'd make in 3 lifetimes. "Why?" she asked. "What is it to you?" The man finally spoke. "Your father was a brilliant mind who didn't know when to let go. What he created. It doesn't belong in civilian hands. It's not safe. It's not a weapon," Riley said. "That's what makes it dangerous," the woman replied. Riley stared at them. At the folder. At the lie sitting beneath their offer that this was about national security, about control. Not once had they asked if she was okay. Not once had they said her father's name. It wasn't about her. It was about what she had. She didn't take the folder. Instead, she stepped back and quietly shut the door. They didn't pound, didn't shout, just stood there for a few moments more before walking back to their black SUV and driving away like they'd never been there. Riley dropped into the chair by her workbench, hands shaking. 10 million, and yet, every time she thought of signing it all away, her father's voice echoed back. "It's still dreaming, waiting to wake up." She opened the flash drive again. There were blueprints for the core shell. integration files, power cell specs, final assembly instructions dated just 3 days before his last disappearance. He'd been close. So close. And now it was hers to finish. That night, she made her choice. She didn't upload it, didn't call the number on the card. She gathered the parts from the vault, pulled the tarp off the old steel bench in the penthouse, and began to lay everything out, one piece at a time. No more doubt. No more waiting. She was going to finish what he started, even if it meant going to war with the people who wanted to bury it. A year later, the penthouse windows no longer stared out like broken eyes. Riley had replaced the glass herself, pane by pane, hauling each one up 4 flights of stairs when she couldn't afford a lift. The vines had been cleared, the elevator fully rewired, and the penthouse lab had been restored to something close to how her father must have left it. But the most important work, the soul of it, had unfolded in secret, late at night, with the world sleeping below her and the past breathing down her neck. She followed every step in the notes, not just with precision, with reverence. The core casing took 6 weeks to weld and calibrate, built with salvaged aerospace alloys and parts she'd had to smuggle in from 3 different states under fake invoices. The memory scaffolding took longer. It wasn't just about logic or processing power. It was emotional architecture, a map of feelings, losses, dreams, a system designed not to calculate, but to care. And every time she doubted herself, she would run her fingers over the final blueprint, where her father had scribbled a single phrase in the corner. If you're scared, you're close. When it was finally ready, she carried the core to the vault, the same place the flash drive had once been hidden, and powered it with a custom array built from Tesla battery shells and hand-wired boards. The light came on slowly, not all at once, like a sunrise breaking through after a long, dark night. The machine didn't hum, it didn't click or beep. It breathed, a soft pulse, like a heartbeat, waiting to be heard. Then it spoke, not through speakers, through light. Colors shimmered across the walls of the penthouse, soft, slow waves of blue and amber and violet. Patterns Riley couldn't name but somehow understood. It wasn't communicating with words. It was feeling, remembering, waking up. She stood there for a long time, her hand resting on the console, tears brimming at the edges of her vision. "You made it," she whispered. No one knocked on the door again. The men in suits never returned. Either they'd given up, or they were waiting, watching. But it didn't matter now. The thing they feared, the soul her father built, was alive. And Riley had made sure it would never belong to anyone who wanted to silence it. She didn't sell it, didn't patent it. Instead, she protected it, taught it, let it learn. She named it Caleb, after the brother she never had, the son her father never got to raise. The light in the penthouse window never turned off after that, a quiet pulse always glowing through the glass, seen only by those who looked close. People in town started to talk. Whispered stories about a girl who bought a hotel for $500 and found something worth more than money inside. But Riley never confirmed anything. She just kept the shop running, and every night, after closing, she climbed the stairs alone, to sit with the machine her father built, and the future they finished together.